Like a satellite dish or something crazy. What are these things that go on the end of my lens? Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. My name is Nick. Thanks for being on my channel once again. Today I wanted to talk to you about gear and lenses. The style of shooting that I like to do is, I guess, that typical kind of run and gun, which means I like to have a backpack of gear and just be really efficient with what I have, because I like to go hiking and go to some more difficult to reach places. So having a whole bunch of gear can kind of get a little bit difficult to hike with and carry around a lot. But I still like to have a really cinematic feel with the footage that I do, and also try and have a range of lenses that try and cater for every situation, or as close as I can get. So I wanted to run you through what I like to use, but I wanted to talk to you and say the most important thing, I think, it's not really the gear. A lot of people literally every day will ask me, what camera do you have? What software do you use to edit? Yes, those things are important to a certain degree, but the most important thing is the story and the vision that you have behind what you're shooting. The camera that you have, it could be a $500 camera. You can still, if you have a powerful story, if you're in a situation with amazing lighting, or if the composition that you have is really thought out, then that is the most important thing. The gear helps, but it doesn't really ultimately make for the best end result. I have three lenses that I like to use. I'm shooting on Canon, so I have a Canon 1DX Mark II, which is great for photos and videos, and I have three lenses. So the first lens is currently on the camera that I'm using, so I'm going to use this coffee cup. It's a 16-35 2.8, which is great for your establishing wide shots. It's also great on a gimbal as well. That's a good lens to get to show people the scene and what is happening, establishing where you are. It's really good. It's also a zoom from 16-35, so you can quickly punch in while you're running around and get a tighter shot with a bit of depth of field as well. Whenever I'm shooting people, that's when I will try as much as I can to switch to my 50mm lens. It's a little, honestly, this is my favorite lens, and it costs like $100. It's a 50mm 1.8, and I love it for portraits or shooting people, just kind of that medium range shot, especially as well in lower lighting with the 1.8. And again, it's $100, so it's crazy cheap and really is one of my favorite lenses. And the third lens that I have a 100mm macro 2.8. I find that that's really good. The macro name often throws people off. They say, oh, is that just for shooting like ants and tiny little creatures? But really, for me, it's amazing for portraits as well. If you get further back, if you don't want to intrude on your subject a little bit, it can be good to have a bit more of a passive shooting mode. I was actually recently in Lombok shooting some little kids at school, and I found that I was shooting with the 50mm. I have to have the camera quite close to their face, and sometimes they freeze up. Even if I'm shooting from the hip, kind of sneaky, they still kind of see what I'm doing, and they don't really get that natural reaction. So I put on the macro and kind of stood back so I could be across the room and shoot still from the hip, but pretending like I'm not shooting. And that's where I was able to get some pretty cool shots of them without them kind of noticing as much. So the macro is really good for detail as well. If I want to get some detail on clothing, it's an amazing sharp lens, and it also, being 100mm, compresses in the background, so you can kind of bring the subject in and the background really close. I'll show you some examples as well, so you know what I'm talking about. And another tip with lenses is one that I get asked all the time, especially when it's on my 50mm lens. I'll screw it on for you. It makes it look like a satellite dish or something crazy. What are these things that go on the end of my lens? These are called step-up rings, and I discovered these a couple of years ago. So what do they do? Basically, when you start to put things on the end of your lenses, like polarizers and ND filters, if you want to get a good one, they can be like a couple of $100 to buy, and they're really, really essential in my opinion for filmmaking. This is a variable ND by Hoya, and if I screw this, you can kind of see what it does, hopefully. If I screw this, it's kind of like a sunglasses on your lens. It makes it brighter, darker, brighter, darker, just by screwing it. So that's really important for keeping your shutter speed down while you're shooting video so that you can still get that natural motion blur. A lot of people overlook that, and I think that that really helps to add a cinematic feel. So screwing this on will be really helpful to create that, especially when the sun is full brightness. It's a really good idea. But because this is like $150, $200, I don't want to buy one of these for all of my lens sizes. So I've got my macro, which is like, what is that, 67 mil, and then I've got my 50 mil, which is a tiny little 49 mil, and then my 16 to 35, which is 80 something, 82 mil. So rather than buy 3 of these, I literally buy step-up rings, which are like $10. What that allows me to do is, so I buy the variable ND for my biggest size lens, which is my 16 to 35. It screws straight on. But then if I want to use my 50 mil, I can screw it onto my step-up ring directly, and then it goes on to here, and then I can actually use that on my 50 mil. And then if I want to, I just take it off at the right size, screw it onto my 100 mil. And that way I've got the one expensive variable ND, I don't have to buy 3, and then I can use it on all my lenses. So now in bright sunlight, if I want to use my 100 mil and still keep my f-stop down as well, I don't want to sacrifice that. So I want to keep that depth of field so I can keep the effect or the look that I'm going for. The only lens that I think that I would like to get next would be a zoom lens, something like a 70 to 200. I think that'll be super helpful if I'm filming wildlife or places that I can't get close to, or if you're in the mountains and you want to get that crazy compression that you might see in a lot of photos, where it really brings the background in and makes you look and see all those amazing layers. I also have a GoPro as well, which is really handy to use. It's a GoPro 7. I use this in a lot of situations now for water activities. I use it as well to put into little spots that are tricky to get to, or if I don't want to risk my expensive camera, I will whip this out and use it. I like to use a ProTune, and the hyper smooth on this is insane. It's so good. So what I'll do is I'll often shoot in linear as well, so I can kind of keep that consistent cinematic feel and make it not look like a GoPro. I think for me, I've always had a love-hate relationship with GoPros, because I think instantly you can see the footage and go, oh, that's GoPro footage, and it kind of pulls you out of that immersive cinematic experience. But what I really like with this one is the linear view, and then you can also use ProTune, so you can still shoot quite flat and then grade that footage and kind of integrate it with your drone and your DSLR, and hopefully no one is the wiser. It's good for water shots as well as slow-mo too. So that's my gear list. It all fits into a backpack. I've got my Mavic 2 Pro, my DSLR, my GoPro, 3 lenses, 2 batteries, and I find that for most situations, that's all that I need to use to capture everything. You've got your wide shots, either with a drone or your 16 to 35, your medium shots, your people shots with your 50 mil, and then 100mm gets you, it's almost getting into that telephoto range, but not quite. Some people might say that the 70 to 200 would be a better replacement for the 100mm, which is a possible option. And the last piece of equipment that I like to use would be a gimbal. I either use the HD GlideCam 4000 or the Ronin S. The Ronin S is an amazing piece of gear, but it can be a little bit difficult if you're in wet situations with a lot of water, or if you're hiking a lot. You kind of don't want to lug that extra piece of gear up with you. I think you can achieve a lot of what you need to get without that, but it is a good luxury to have if you're doing a lot of running shots, chasing people around. It can get that smooth shot. So the GlideCam or the Ronin, they're both awesome options. Probably for more run and gun, I would go with the GlideCam because there's less moving parts, one less battery you've got to charge and all that kind of stuff. Batteries can kind of get a pain when at the end of the day you've got to charge like 4 different things. GlideCam for the travel, my kind of travel lifestyle, is a lot better option to go with. I hope that helps you get a little insight into the kind of gear that I like to shoot with. I'll have links below to a list of all the gear that I have, just to make it easy for you to have a look at. If you have any questions, do let me know and I'll be more than happy to answer them. That's it for me, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.